Support comes from Helen Keller International. Last year, nearly 84 million children and families received life-saving care from generous supporters, but the need remains urgent. Learn more about ways to help continue to build a healthier world for all at helenkellerintl.org/KUOW.
Each story you hear on Planet Money starts with a question. What happens if we refund tariffs? Why are groceries so expensive? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious because the forces shaping our world can be hard to see. Follow NPR's Planet Money wherever you get your podcasts and start seeing how the economy really works.
CEOs have been making some bold claims about how artificial intelligence will change work.
My prediction is that work will be optional. In the same way, like you can go to the store and just buy some vegetables, or you could grow vegetables in your backyard. People still do it because they like growing vegetables.
I believe that 30 years from now, a lot of people, your kids are probably working 3.5 days a week.
But so far, that's not the reality.
The promise of AI was to lighten the workload while increasing productivity. But as more people are using AI for work, a new study published in the Harvard Business Review says AI overuse could spark what they're calling brain fry.
Whether AI makes us work more or less, there's no question it's already changing the way millions of people do their jobs. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
I'm Joshua McNichols, and this is Booming.
Today, how is AI transforming the workplace? And how can everyday workers prepare for the future? That's coming up.
Hey, sorry I'm a bit late. I wasn't sure what the etiquette was for this kind of thing, so I just walked around the block a little bit.
Oh, you can show up early, or on time. Early's probably even better.
Okay, great.
So, Monica, the story of AI for the last couple of years, for right or wrong, when people think about AI, they think about layoffs.
Yeah, and it's understandable why. Tech companies are investing heavily in AI. They're building data centers to train and power AI. And at the same time, they've been doing lots of layoffs. In Washington state alone, since 2023, close to 25,000 tech workers have lost their jobs. So whether or not they're being replaced outright by AI, the association is present on everybody's minds. And it's spilling over to non-tech companies too, as everybody tries to figure out how to use AI to become more efficient.
So we've heard a lot about people who are, having to leave. Maybe they're being forced out. Maybe they're being laid off. And we've heard less about what the people who are left behind are actually doing in their jobs with AI. So it makes me curious, is AI making work more efficient? What have you heard about the way people are actually using AI in their day-to-day work lives?
It's really a mixed bag. On the extreme ends of the workforce are companies like Amazon, for example, which has laid down some pretty heavy mandates about AI usage. They've reportedly told their workforce that they want 80% of software developers to be using AI every single week. That approach is filtering down to other companies like Starbucks, which has also said that it's going to link employee bonuses to AI usage for their tech teams, not their baristas. Companies can track that AI usage through how many AI tokens employees are using.
Okay, tokens. We should probably define AI tokens for people listening. I know that they're kind of a unit of measurement for AI usage.
Right, sort of like mobile data for your phone. Like back in the day when you would prepay for a certain amount of cell phone minutes, and then every time you'd send or receive a text, your minutes went down.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are employees actually using AI for?
Well, mostly a lot of menial tasks. I've heard about tech workers using AI to help write and check code, sending emails, managing Slack messages, nothing groundbreaking. But that's kind of the point. Companies are hoping that pushing AI into employees' workflows will help make the boring things more efficient and then give those employees more time to be creative and think about big problems, more time to work faster.
Yeah. And this idea that AI will free people up to do the work that they really care about is this message that, we're seeing everywhere these days. I know you've been reporting on that. A few tech leaders have said, AI is so powerful, it could mean a 4-day work week for a lot of industries. But I do wonder if making work more efficient will actually make it more meaningful. Like, will AI give me more time to use as I want? Or will companies just, add more work?
Yeah, this is a question that I've been wondering about too. It's why we got in touch with Martin Ford. Martin is a futurist, and he's a leading expert on the impact of artificial intelligence on workplaces and the economy and society. He's the author of 4 books on technology, and he just released a new edition of his book, The Rise of the Robots: Technology and the Threat of a Jobless Future. And he had some interesting things to say about how much AI could actually change the way we work.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it.
Martin, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
At Booming, we've been tossing around this question: is AI making us work more or less? Our current reality seems to be people working just as many hours, if not more, and using AI to increase their output. So is AI making us work more or less?
I think it depends on individual people and the jobs they're doing. I mean, I've heard various anecdotes about this. In some cases, there are certainly people bringing AI into the workplace without really coordinating with their employer. And I think there are some instances of people actually working less. Maybe especially if they're working from home, they're able to use AI to do, their job much faster and more productively. And maybe they have some free time as a result of that. So in that case, they might be working less. In other instances, as you say, especially where the employer is pressing people to use AI, they may in fact be working the same or even more and producing much more. And of course, my thesis is that I think ultimately, eventually, machines are going to displace more and more workers. So in that case, you could have people working less because they lose their jobs. And then the remaining people, as the jobs are restructured, as certain tasks are automated, the remaining people may be responsible for more. And it's sort of in the same way that would happen during a normal layoff, when you have some jobs cut and then the people that are still within the organization, they end up doing more work. So it can, I think, impact in many different ways depending on the individual situation.
Yeah, and it seems like it's such a hard thing to measure because if someone is working from home and using Claude or ChatGPT in an unsanctioned way, it's not like they're going to report that to their manager, or it would necessarily show up as productivity gains for the company because they're just sort of doing it in the background.
Right. I think definitely some people are doing that, and they'll be able to get away with that for a time, right? But eventually, I think employers will get smart to it and begin demanding more once these tools are more prevalent.
And you said it depends on the type of job. Do we have any sense for which sectors of the economy are replacing more work with AI?
Well, right now, obviously, the most extraordinary advances that we're seeing is really in the large language models. And the most direct application of those kinds of technologies are going to be primarily in white-collar jobs, especially jobs that are fairly close to sort of the digital realm. In other words, software developers is one type of job that's definitely being heavily impacted. I think jobs in finance, in some cases, jobs in law, any kind of job where what you're really doing is sitting in front of a computer, manipulating information in some way, writing reports, doing quantitative analysis, all of these types of activities, especially if they tend to be fairly predictable, are going to be very highly susceptible to automation by the large language models. So I think that's where the focus is right now. But we should say that at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of advances in robotics. And so, physical machines that can also do physical work are also going to be a big part of this trend.
I want to step back a little bit and just think about these moments in history where we've had a general purpose technology come online that really can take over a lot of tasks. Has there been a time in history where a big technological advancement like that actually reduced the time people spend working, or are we just getting more out of each hour with each of these big technological leaps forward?
Sure. I mean, technology has definitely led to us having to work less. And of course, as we work less, be able to produce much more. I mean, if you go back to the Industrial Revolution, you had people working 12 hours a day, at least 6 days a week. You had children, right, working in factories. So it's really a combination of technological advancement together, of course, with regulation, outlawing things like child labor and creating a weekend for us. I mean, a lot of that happened back in the 1930s. As a result of the labor movement. But certainly technology has played a major, major role in giving us all better lives, having to work less in more comfortable environments, and at the same time, of course, being able to produce much more.
Can we really say it was technology? Because like you said, labor organizing gave us the weekend, which is probably the biggest example of an actual reduction in workdays and hours. I mean, it also gave us the 8-hour workday versus the 12-hour workday. So when we look at the moment we're in now, we certainly have the technological advancements, but labor organizing is very weak, especially with the threat that this technology can just replace workers. I guess it just makes me feel a bit skeptical that it's going to really have an impact on the amount of time we spend working.
Well, I think that, again, we have to see how it plays out. But I do think that artificial intelligence is different from other technologies that have come before. And the reason is that it is going to directly compete with our core competence, right? The thing that really sets us apart as human beings, right? Which is our ability to think, our intelligence, right? And it's that quality that has enabled us to adapt successfully to all of the technological revolutions that came before. So, for example, we had an agricultural revolution where in the United States, most people were working on farms at one point, and today it's only maybe 2% of the workforce that are working in agriculture. We adapted to it, right? We found other sectors to work in. We were smart enough to figure out how to do different types of work. But in the case of AI, there's now this new entity that has that same capability, or at some point in the future will certainly have that same capability. So even as we can adapt to new situations, the AI will also be able to adapt to new situations. And it's going to be a general purpose technology, right? It's going to be systemic. It will impact everywhere, not just one sector of the economy, the way, for example, agricultural machinery did. It will be really across the board. And so I think that as a result of that, we have to get prepared for a different outcome.
Do you think that the financials of replacing workers with AI will ultimately pencil out? Because we've started to see some reporting about companies getting their bill for all the AI tokens they're using up. And in some cases, it's as much as $100,000 for one AI agent, which you think, well, that's maybe about what the employee would cost, perhaps a bit more. But I think right now, it seems like these technologies are sort of subsidized by the gold rush, by the desire for these companies to get there first rather than maximize their profits. But I do wonder if it's going to be possible to make such a compute-intensive technology cheap enough to actually get to that point where we see widespread job displacement.
Right. I believe that will happen simply because, these technologies will become cheaper, right? I mean, that's been the whole story of Moore's Law, right, as has played out with computer technology, that in general information technology, including AI, will get more powerful and also more affordable. And you see that, already what the examples you're giving of these very high costs are with the frontier models, right, the very most advanced models from Anthropic or OpenAI or Google. But if you're using one of the models that came out, a year ago, then it's much more affordable, right? So the point is that a year from now, there'll be a new frontier and the systems that are a little bit less powerful will be much more affordable. And that's going to continue. So, but I do think that the costs are significant. And that's one of the reasons that I think ultimately companies will begin to look toward displacing labor, saving on labor's costs in order to recoup that investment, and get a return on that investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an interesting thing about the factory example is when factories were first given electricity, they didn't see the kind of productivity increases that were expected. And it wasn't until new factories were designed kind of from the ground up with electricity at the forefront that they saw that big leap forward. It does make me wonder if maybe we're just trying to squeeze this new technology into an old way of doing business, and we're not really going to see the transformation in the culture of work for another decade when new companies are built starting with the premise that they can do most of the work with AI.
That's certainly possible. I mean, it's very unpredictable. And you hear people like Dario Amodei at Anthropic say things like, half the entry level white-collar jobs are going to disappear in the next 18 months. And I think that's a very, very aggressive prediction, because it's not just a question of whether the technology is at that point, whether the technology becomes available, but of course also how long will it take businesses to figure out how to deploy that technology in an effective way. So it could certainly be longer. And I think we can hope that it will be a gradual process, right? So that we have more time to adapt to it. We really don't want it to be a very sudden, highly disruptive thing, because that's really going to be very difficult to deal with.
You know, inevitability is one of the concepts around AI replacing work that is very hotly debated. There are creative professions, or at least creative professionals in fields like publishing or the film industry, that say no AI use whatsoever, that they find the way that these technologies were trained and developed to be unethical. They find the resource consumption to be unacceptable, and they're just saying we should fight against it. We should not use it in any capacity. What future do you predict for those workers or the industries that they're in?
Right. I mean, this is an issue, and it's closely intertwined with the issue of copyright and what's called the fair use provision. Is it okay for artificial intelligence to learn basically on the work of other people and then become smart enough to do what they're doing, right? That's the concern. And that's something that's going to have to be reviewed by the courts, I think, and ultimately we'll have policies in place to deal with that. But the real issue is what I would call scalability. I mean, suppose you're a famous artist and another person comes along and studies, you know, your work and maybe develops their own kind of artistic technique that sort of is somewhat similar to yours, but hopefully differentiated. I think everyone agrees that's okay, right? That's fair use for a person to do that. But the thing is, of course, one person has only one person's worth of output, right? It's, you know, if I'm a up and coming artist, then maybe I can create works of art, but I can only do that at a scale that is possible for one person. But when an AI comes along and studies everything that an artist or a writer or some other creative person has done, it can essentially create almost an unlimited amount of output, right? It can basically flood the market with things that are quite similar to what that original person had done. And so that's why I think the copyright issues around this are very tricky. And I think that I bet it will, you know, ultimately go to the Supreme Court, and they'll have to weigh these different issues and come up with a policy.
Mm-hmm. What policies would we need if we actually wanted to get to that utopian future that tech CEOs predict, where everyone is only working a few days a week on things that they love, and AI has taken over all of the rote tasks, but not taken everybody's job?
Right. I think that in a future where some segment of the population is really going to struggle to find work, right? Because, you know, people have different levels of capability, right? Most people are clustered around average, and we may get to a future where AI is simply better than most average people at almost everything, right? And we're going to have to figure out a way to adapt to that. And what I've suggested is probably we need to embrace something like a universal basic income, some mechanism where we can get income supplementation to people if, in fact, they're not able to generate enough income from traditional work or, and of course, there will be other things people can do. They can start a business, do something entrepreneurial, and I think there will be many opportunities there. But I don't think everyone is going to succeed at that. So there will be some segment of the population that is really going to struggle in the future. And I don't know how many people that will be. It could potentially be most people at some point if these technologies become advanced enough. And so we're going to have to figure out another way, basically, to get income into the hands of people that are left behind, not only as a social issue, right, to make sure that we don't have people living on the street and not being able to afford the basics, but also as an economic issue, because you know, the economy needs people that can buy all the products and services being produced, right? I mean, remember that the economy has two sides, right? We tend to focus a lot on the production side, creating products and services, and certainly AI is going to make that a lot more efficient. But there is also the consumption side. You have to have people with sufficient income and sufficient confidence to go out there and buy all the things being produced, right? We've got to take care of both sides of the economy. And so eventually, I think we're going to have to come up with new schemes to get sufficient purchasing power into the hands of people so that they can be effective consumers.
Yeah, I would say as far as policy ideas to respond to this predicted job loss, UBI is probably the most commonly brought up or the most fleshed out. But I think it's a little bit of a misconception that most people don't want to work. I think most people get a sense of dignity and purpose from working. Do you have any ideas, or have you heard any ideas for dealing with the more social consequences of robbing people of that?
Right. I mean, that's definitely a major issue, and definitely a universal basic income or any type of scheme like that is not a panacea. It comes with many problems. I mean, in some ways, I think of a UBI as being sort of the least bad solution. I mean, it definitely has real problems. And one of the biggest is, as you're saying, work provides dignity. It provides a sense of accomplishment, a sense that you're contributing something, right? And for many people, their job, their occupation is just a huge part of their identity, right? So it definitely is a major issue, and we're going to have to come up with ways to address that. One thing that I've suggested in my writing is that rather than just having a simple universal basic income where everyone gets exactly the same amount, we could actually build some incentives into that so that there were opportunities for people to get a higher income. And I think the most important area to do that would be in education. One thing I would really worry about if we had an actual UBI would be the impact of that on motivation for people to become educated. Why stay in school, right? I mean, some people will be really motivated because they love to learn, but that's not everyone. Some people really struggle with it. And so it's important, I think, to have an incentive, right? If you finish high school and you graduate, you're actually going to have access to a somewhat higher income than if you just drop out and sit around playing video games. And we could maybe structure other kinds of incentives into it as well, like, for example, working in the community, volunteering. There are many possibilities there. I think we need lots and lots of very smart people with lots of experience in different fields to really begin thinking very seriously about this issue so that we can ultimately craft a solution.
Mm-hmm. What about on the individual level? How should workers think about balancing using AI to become more efficient without putting themselves out of work or training their AI replacements?
What I would say is that in terms of your individual opportunities going forward, I think it's important to embrace it. I understand some people object to it, feel it may be unethical, and there may be a role for policies. I mean, when you talk about how people are training the AI, the most famous thing that's going on right at this moment is that Mark Zuckerberg, right, recently put this system in place to basically record everything that his employees are doing and use that to train his artificial intelligence and something like that. I can certainly understand how people might find that quite objectionable. So if you feel that way, then, you have to get out into the political sphere and advocate maybe for policies that might limit companies' ability to do that kind of thing. But in terms of your individual future, and you want to position yourself for a job market in the future, I really think that you can't just brush this off and say, I don't want to learn about AI. Okay, it's possible to learn about it and learn how to use it and maybe still raise some political concerns if you have those, right? Those are kind of two different spheres.
Well, Martin, thank you for being part of this conversation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
We'll be right back with more Booming after a quick break.
Support comes from Helen Keller International. Helen Keller believed that the welfare of each is bound up in the welfare of all, a conviction that continues to guide the organization's work worldwide, helping families amidst rising food costs, climate shocks, and under-resourced health systems. More at helenkellerintl.org/KUOW.
Just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill.
We all remember this song. It made it all seem so simple, and turns out it's not. Who writes, influences, and kills bills? It gets messy. I'm Scott Greenstone.
And I'm Libby Dankman. On Sound Politics, we tell that story, the inside track on how policy gets made in this Washington and the other one, and how it impacts you.
Listen now on the KUOW app or wherever you get your podcasts.
So, Monica, it's clear from this conversation you had with Martin Ford that, AI is going to radically change the way we actually do work in our jobs. But one thing that really piqued my interest here is I'm really fascinated with this question of what it means for many of us to be not working or working significantly less, And I know Martin, he's kind of in the middle. He doesn't seem to have blinders on about this, but sometimes the way that CEOs talk about people having extra time and getting universal basic income can feel very naive to me for a couple of different reasons. First, we saw what happened when people had a lot of extra time on their hands during COVID.
Right.
They spent time on social media going down rabbit holes and getting, radicalized on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, it was a hard time for many reasons. I know personally, my husband and I probably had too many old fashions during that period. Like it was too much idle time. And I agree. I think that we're not having a deep enough conversation about the philosophical and kind of spiritual issues that might arise when people don't have a job that they're spending a significant amount of their time on.
Uh-huh. And then the second thing that comes to mind for me is I'm a little skeptical about the idea that companies will just start giving people lots of extra time to do whatever they want. One thing we've seen companies do as they start to implement more AI in their, ask employees to do more AI is they lay people off. Now, we don't know completely if it's because of AI that people are getting laid off, but I'm not seeing companies say, okay, everybody's being way more efficient. We're going to keep paying you the same amount of money and let you work 4 days a week. I know there are a couple of cases of those, but we're just hearing predictions of that, but mostly we're just seeing layoffs.
Right. It is very unusual to have an employer gain a bunch of efficiencies and then give them back to the employees as free time. Historically, anytime we've had a technology come in and make people more efficient, companies have used that to increase their bottom line. I mean, that's what companies do. If we want to have a conversation about the shape and structure of work and the hours we spend working, that is something that I think belongs squarely in the arena of labor organizing and policy, because those are the levers that have actually affected that change in the past. One of the examples from history that maybe offers a kind of example is the Works Progress Administration during the Great Depression. It wasn't just universal basic income giving money to people who were unable to work. It was compensating them for doing things like producing art or, building, carving out roads through, the foothills of the mountains up just south of Bellingham, Chuckanut Drive, this beautiful scenic drive that ends up in car commercials all the time. It's so beautiful. That was for a great road trip.
Exactly. That was carved out because of the Works Progress Administration. So I don't know. I wonder if another potential future is that we could see this great flowering of the arts and infrastructure as that is one thing that AI cannot do. And it is kind of dignified work that we could pay for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing that is frustrating to a lot of people is, on the one hand, you have this prediction of widespread job loss, maybe more rapidly than we've ever seen before. And so I think there's a real appetite for a very comprehensive policy response to that doesn't just say, maybe we'll give people, $1,500 a month in universal basic income, but says we're going to really think about what people are losing and what they need to keep the fabric of our society strong, and we're going to build out a jobs program or something that sort of meets that looming threat. But that's not what we've seen on the regulatory side. We have seen a sort of ambivalence about it.
Yeah. Well, lots of reporting for us to do on this in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it for Booming. Thanks so much for listening.
We are working on a future episode about the IRL economy. In other words, things that you intentionally do in real life as a reaction to technology. Maybe you go to an in-person singles event instead of using the dating apps. If you fit the bill, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at booming@kuow.org or leave us a voicemail at 206-221-7158, and you may be featured in a future episode.
And thanks to people who are donating to the show. We love it when you do that, so keep at it. If you want to donate, go to kuow.org/booming. It supports us a lot. Thanks.
Our producers are Lucy Suchek and Alec Cowan. Our editor is Carol Smith. Our music is by Alec Cowan, Blue Dot Sessions, and MusicBed. I'm Monica Nicholsberg.
I'm Joshua McNichols, and we'll see you next time.
Support comes from Helen Keller International. Millions of families around the world are at grave risk, but solutions are within reach. Helen Keller's proven cost-effective solutions reach children and families in greatest need. More on how to help at helenkellerintl.org/KUOW.
Why is healthcare so expensive in the U.S.? How is my credit score calculated? Does immigration enforcement actually reduce crime? We all have the big, complicated questions we're curious about, and that's why we made Control F. Control F is a podcast from KUOW that explains how the world works using data. Each episode, we break down the numbers driving culture, the economy, and politics. Join the search. Listen to Control F wherever you get podcasts.